envy is an emotion as old as time itself. It's even one of the 7 deadly sins, often easily confused with jealousy, which is a little bit different. Envy is about what we don't have and wanting what we don't have, whereas jealousy is about the fear of losing what we do have. Both of them are difficult, challenging, and potentially extremely destructive emotions. But today I want to focus on envy, because it seems to me, and not only to me, that we're living in a world where envy has gained new currency. We've got all sorts of new platforms in our world of social media, and it seems that that old deadly sin of envy, what the poet Dante called the root of all the evils, and what some others have called the one deadly sin that isn't so much fun, well, it seems like it's alive and well more than ever. All sorts of people have obviously spoken about envy, and many psychologists talk about it as this common currency of desire, but it has been referred to as hostile worship by Stanford professor Robert Harrison. Hostile worship, that's quite a strong term, quite an interesting term. He says it turns admiration into resentment. So hostility, worship, admiration, resentment, it seems as if envy is about a delicate balance that tips, that we start off admiring something and end up resenting someone. And so envy is an insidious and dangerous emotion. The philosopher René Girard says that envy is the one taboo that is alive and well in our contemporary society, but it's the one that few will ever talk about or confess to. Interesting and a little ironic, because we live in a world where that currency of envy is stronger than ever, where we post about ourselves and we read about other people's posts, and we get to be all sorts of envious. So the one advice that few will talk about or confess to, but that everyone seems to be engaging in. Patricia Polledri is a psychologist who's worked on envy quite strongly. She comes from a more psychoanalytical school, who kind of delve into people's past, and she takes an even stronger tone than that hostility that I spoke about earlier on. She says that envy can be very dangerous. It can become abusive, it can become violent, and ultimately she says that envy is wanting to destroy what someone else has. It's not just wanting it for yourself, but wanting other people not to have it. She says it is a deep-rooted issue where you are resentful of someone else's well-being, whether that be their looks, their position, or the car that they have. She calls it silent, destructive, underhanded, pure malice, and pure hatred. It sounds like very strong terms. It is very strong terms. But also think about what she's saying then. When she talks about emotional abuse and violence, she talks about criminality as well. And she points out that many acts of criminality and criminal destruction are in fact caused by envy, something which we see frequently in the world about us. So she is really relating it to a very strong result. But she also goes on to say that she doesn't think that we are naturally that way. She says that it's obviously caused by some early life problem, an early deprivation, being deprived of the motherly bond or the motherly love at a very young age, creating a sense of not having and not being nourished that is kind of insatiable, can't be changed and can't be satisfied, and then ultimately creates the kind of sense of wanting what other people seem to have. And thus envy is born, and also this desire to destroy what other people have. Something quite challenging to sometimes recognize in ourselves and what's happening in our world. But we don't have to take such a strong view, and we don't even have to talk in terms of psychoanalytics and pathology, because all of us experience envy in our everyday lives, and I think all of us experience it both ways. We envy others, and we either want others to envy us, or we actually create that envy in them, and that is through the medium of social media. Social media has given us a reach like never before. Before, we had the ability to, or the possibility of envying those in our immediate environment, and eventually perhaps envying those that we saw on TV or that were celebrities or something like that. Now we live in a world where we've kind of got access to everyone. We can envy millions of people. We can literally envy anyone in the world. So there's so much more possibility, and social media has made other people's lives look fantastic. We look at other people having the most amazing, happy lives, and we perpetrate that ourselves. We post the best things about ourselves, about our lives, and what we're doing, which sounds like an innocent enough activity, but really it's a filtered, a very carefully monitored, moderated version of our lives, and so is everyone else's. So we look at these, what Professor Ethan Kross of the University of Michigan calls photoshopped lives, and we are basically experiencing envy taken to an extreme, he says. He says it exerts a toll on us, the likes of which our species has never experienced. And that, I mean, it's more extreme words, as we've seen people use for it, but he's someone who studies the impact of Facebook on well-being and on human psychology. And in fact, as he says, he has huge data sets of literally hundreds of thousands of people. So his research is generally considered very valid because of that. And he shows that the impact of social media, specializing in Facebook he does, is to create depression and a lot of misery, all born out of this extreme envy. And it will have a strong impact on our species. We're not equipped to deal with that. You know, being self-destructive is not something new to human beings. Destroying our own planet is something that we engage in quite heartily. And there are many other self-destructive behaviors that we have. But we've lifted up envy to this high art of self-torture in our era. And so we are hurting ourselves in all sorts of new ways. But the issue is that it is creating issues, and psychologists and astrologers and others are beginning to see that people are suffering from this, on the one hand, like depression or disconnect, because they can't achieve what they think that other people have, and what they see other people have from these kind of photoshopped lives, these faked versions of ourselves that everyone's busy posting on all the different social media. And psychologist Rachel Andrew, who specializes in envy, says that on the one hand that creates emotional problems of its own, like I've said, depression and so on, and on the other hand it exacerbates and brings out existing other issues, creating a lot of emotional disharmony. And of course, it's amplified by the fact that we're exposed to so much that we can envy that it's more or less a runaway train. Whether it's Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, whichever way you turn, you're seeing other people's fantastic lives. And so all of these problems increasingly crop up. And the fact is that not only has our reach increased of who we can envy, but what we envy is less and less true, because everyone is posting the best of our lives, and all of us are doing it too. One of the things that is interesting that we all know, is that we all know this, because we all engage in it. We all filter our lives. We all post the best of what's happening to us, or we portray it in the best of what's happening to us. And intellectually, we know that everyone must be doing that. So if I'm doing it, others are doing it, and kind of vice versa. And yet, as Rachel Andrews says, it still continues to press our buttons when we see what we see, because we've got this great intellectual capacity, but at heart we've got this more instinctual, insecure, emotional self that easily has its buttons pressed, or that at least has buttons to press. And so it kind of taps into our deepest sense of what we don't have, and what we should have, and what's expected of us, or how others judge us. And of course, partly because we engage in some of those emotions about them. So it makes us feel terribly disconnected, guilty on the one hand, envious on the other hand, all of these stirred up negative emotions. The runaway train is that there can't be a good end to that. And then you get the perspective of Shelley Turkle, who says that on top of that, then, we even create this certain amount of self-envy. Self-envy is where we create these online versions of ourselves, our profiles on Facebook and everywhere else, and we're creating and posting the better and better versions of what's going on in our lives, and then we feel this pressure to live up to it. We feel this pressure to post things, and pressure to post things which have that level of creating likes and essentially creating envy in other people. We are engaging in creating envy in other people, but we end up also envying it ourselves, because we don't really have the lives we're portraying, and we feel more and more personal pressure and maybe social pressure to have that life. And so we might do more and more outrageous things. We've all heard of people who do outrageous selfies. That's an example of people getting killed doing crazy selfies, and other consequences are because of that. They want the likes and they want the envy of those pictures that they post. They want more likes and views than anyone else. And then they obviously want people to want how many likes and views they've got, because that's what those likes are all about. So it's like we experience a certain amount of FOMO about ourselves. We don't measure up to ourselves. We experience FOMO, fear of missing out, about our own lives. So we kind of feel envy of ourselves. It's not our real selves. We're creating this disconnect, and we're creating an inauthenticity that becomes deeply disturbing. Turkle says, we are curiously envious of our own avatars. Avatars being our online incarnations of ourselves, the online identity that we portray. So that's an altogether new kind of envy, self-envy, which again cannot really be satisfied in any way, and leads to destructive behaviors, which is not just getting yourself killed, taking a selfie, but can even, for most people of course, is the destructive emotional behavior that I'm talking about. It is true that envy can of course motivate us. It's not 100% bad if you want to look at it that way. We can aspire to things as well. We can aspire to bettering ourselves. We can have ambitions. It's not to say that all aspiration is envious, or all inspiration from others is envious, but we need to monitor ourselves very carefully. The feeling of envy is also related to depression, to low self-esteem, and also to feeling less than in some way. And we need to monitor those things inside ourselves and realize where inspiration is sometimes not really a healthy thing. So what can we do about it? Well, how can we take charge of this tendency in ourselves to be envious, and in our tendency to create a certain amount of envy in others? Well, let's start off there. Let's start off talking about posting. We really need to think before we post. Even more, think about, why am I posting what I'm posting? We try and manage our online personality in such a way. We've got to be honest with ourselves and say, what is the motivation behind this? If you think that posting good news that's certainly an innocent, good thing to do, you'd still have to ask yourself, why do I really want to do that? The people in your life know that. The people close to you are going to know that soon. You talk to people, you message them. The people who are really in your life are people you interact with frequently enough to post, to know about the good news anyway, or quickly to find out about it. Posting it, you know, will achieve likes and lots and lots and lots of congratulations. And we've got to learn to think of that as not so innocent, that we're reinforcing this tendency in ourselves. So monitoring ourselves, asking yourself really, really, why am I posting this? Is it out of some kind of vanity that makes me want more likes, more congratulations, or more whatever the case may be? And, you know, even if the answer is, I just want other people to know that I'm doing well, that's wanting other people to envy you. We all have to create a brand and manage a brand and portray our brand on social media. It doesn't mean it's all good. It might be necessary for business, but what we're learning to do as well is learn to value showing off. We're encouraged to show off. We are encouraged to kind of be unapologetic about showing off. It's become not only normalized, but actually expected of us to promote ourselves all the time. And that very rapidly leads to negative behaviors. It leads to humble bragging as well. You've heard the term humble bragging. It's become a real word. It is a real thing. It's where we brag while undermining the achievement at the same time, so it doesn't look like we're bragging, or undermining ourselves while bragging. And or we just brag straight. But either way, it's more or less an encouraged behavior. So we need to identify it in ourselves, to kind of pin it down in ourselves and name it, and understand why we post what we post. And then looking at it from the other side of it, and when we look at what other people are posting, and when we look at how we respond to what other people are posting, we've got to ask ourselves, this thing that I want that they have, what is it? Is it in my life? Is it an achievable thing? Does it actually fit into what I want with my life and what I'm doing with my life? Is it actually good for me? Kind of, what's it got to do with me? And, you know, sipping cocktails on a tropical island is probably not a really valid, good for me kind of thing to have, because actually, for most of us, it is out of our realm of likelihood and possibility. You know, it's those kind of things that seem so innocent, but that continuously tell us what we're not and what we don't have. So we've also got to look at the validity of the standards by which we're judging ourselves. The philosopher Alain de Botton says that we've actually got to look at what is the value that we're looking up to, what is the status that we're aspiring to. And he says we've got to learn to identify that status is an innocuous kind of tool. Firstly, we're looking for love from the world, and we've pegged that to tangible results. So we link success to monetary gain, or getting the job, or something that's very tangible in the world. And we measure each other by that, and we measure each other by how much we have. And we've got to actually learn to what is the good standard to aspire to, says de Botton. And he says what we've got to understand is that the aspirations that we have in our world, based on this, the concept of merit being based on what you have and what you achieve, is a myth. Because in a capitalist Western-style society, that is mostly based on chance circumstances. Some of it is based on you, but a lot of it is based on chance circumstances. Because after all, as we all know, we don't live in a level playing field. So things like race like the family that you're born into, the country that you're born into, the connections that you have, where in the world you physically are, how much money you have, and luck itself. All of those things really plug into whether you're going to advance in life or whether not, or how easy or hard it is to do that, or what kind of possibility and legitimate goals plug into that. All of those things are different from person to person anyway, so the way that we set our standard is wrong. We need to redefine what it is that we aspire to in terms of ourselves. We mustn't aspire to the super achievers, because they don't represent anything that's real to most of the world. We need to aspire to, he says, something more transcendent. So the transcendent is what is your own sense of your own value, your soul, your sense of yourself. And look at things that are transcendent in the world, literature and art, and the values that they espouse that are not about material things, but that are about human values, and reorient ourselves to the human values we also get through culture, through our cultures, and as I said, through our various arts, and to our spiritual values. But most important is to create a value system around ourselves, around what we actually define as good and who we are. So like that we can measure it, engage it, achieve success or not post about it, and not relate it to other people and what they have. And so, as I said, looking at greater things like literature, art, or history, and seeing values that can inspire us, and then working towards those within ourselves. The Hawaiians say, bless what you want. Don't give in to envy, to sarcasm, to false admirations. Just bless what you want, which is a good way to help us let go in some way. Most importantly, we need to learn to think before we post. So we've got two sides to the story. Think before you post. When looking at others' posts, think, what has that to do with my life? Why do I really want that? And think, what more legitimate something perhaps could I want in my life that is achievable, that is about me and my life, and that I will feel satisfied enough when I have, that I don't have to announce it to the world. That is a way to curb and control envy. Philosophy professor William Irvin says, one of the most basic tricks to making sure that your life is balanced and good is realizing that there are a small number of people whose opinion matters in your life, and a huge number of people whose opinion doesn't matter. And using that filter helps you understand, why am I posting and from whom am I expecting a result? And then he says he looks at his emails and he filters out all the promotional material about himself before he sends it, or his posts before he posts them, because the opinion doesn't really matter if the people are going to read it. And he realizes he most of the time doesn't send the mail, the newsletter, or post the post, which is a great exercise. Most importantly, it is, according to Buddhist Tara Brooke, it is really about understanding your feelings of lacking somewhere and learning to focus on the important things that you do have, where that opinion matters, the family, the people that you love, the people who actually do love you. And that's where you can focus on what you already do have and not have to envy anything else. And every time you feel those urges towards envying, you focus on what you have and appreciate what you have, from the smallest thing to the largest thing. You may have more in the future. You will have different things than what other people have. Just focus on what you have, emphasize that, be in that, and envy drifts away. I think, and in many places in life, we can benefit by blessing what we don't have, blessing what we don't need and don't need to want, rather than engaging with it in so many ways. As I've often said, the Stoics say concentrate on your life and what you have and what you're in control of. And certainly aspiring all the time to what other people seem to have and don't even really have is definitely not going to result in you being able to pursue something you really are in control of. So, think before you post, think when you read their post, define things that are more real and more valuable in your life that are attainable, and we'll move on from those negative emotions and their consequences. And I'll see you back again, same time next week.